It's well cataloged over the years that I have a problem with many different steel targets on the market. And this is because I believe that companies are not doing justice for their customers, and they're not doing enough legwork to create highly refined systems that are actually going to help you as you are training to become a better defender. This is especially true when we are looking at popper targets, because most people look at poppers and say those are strictly competition use only targets. But the reality is, if they were designed properly, they could be a valuable tool to you as you are training to become a better defender of your life, your family's life, your property, and possibly even your country. So what I want to do today is introduce you to the second generation of our popper target systems. Let's get into it. When I'm summarizing the VTAR poppers and I'm describing them to folks, I like to think of it as one of the most versatile platforms that you're going to find in our lineup. And it really is suitable for almost every single type of training that you're going to encounter, every type of range that you're going to encounter, and every type of caliber and training style that you might experience. And it was with that in mind that we designed this to be an extremely versatile platform, because we know that it needs to be adaptable to any range scenario. So before I dive into how I look at this from various training styles, I want to reinforce a couple of the key characteristics about this system. The portability aspect to me is a key component that I think that you should really hone in on. The fact that everything that you need for this system is included in a collapsible setup that can be locked down into a folded position means that you can throw this single target system into your vehicle, drive out to wherever you shoot, and you will have everything that you need on tap for your range day training. And that just keeps your range day simple. Does that mean that it's for every single range day? No, it does kind of have its own role. And there are other systems in our lineup that might fill other roles better for you. But if you are a simplistic kind of person, you just want simple, this is something you should definitely consider. When we are looking at the function and form of this, it's nice and low to the ground. And you might be asking, why does that matter? Well, in a scenario where your range might not have very tall berms, it might not be the best to have something like an VTAR system on a tall piece of wood. Maybe you don't like wood at all. You don't want 2x4s. You don't want the extra hassle. This just eliminates all of that. And it might be something that you should consider. The other key aspect about this target system is the fact that it is resettable. And what I mean by that is you can set spring tension to allow the plate to get struck by a bullet, move a little bit, and then pop back into position. So we're reinforcing good habits with this system because we are seeing an input of our shots. What we are doing at the gun and what the reaction is downrange is going to reinforce good habits. It's going to help push us towards better skill sets with our firearms. And further, you can even remove the limiter pin, remove the spring kit altogether, and train on these VTAR poppers in more of a traditional sense. And what I mean by that is poppers that simply fall over. And you can do that with these systems as well. And there are times where I will use the poppers in a knockdown setting, whether I'm setting up sort of a mimicked competition stage, or I just want to reinforce my analytics of what my rounds are doing to a target downrange. And I want to explain that real quick. And what I mean by that is I might have a shot that I pull really low and it hits low on the belly of this target. It might not knock it over. I might have to follow up. I might have to do some more engagement downrange to actually make this plate fall over when I have the spring kit removed. And it's just that level of processing to me I value. I value seeing a reaction from a target system, not just hearing the ring. But that's the last point I want to hammer home with. Because we used familiar shapes and sizes in the C-zone and reduced C-zone, they ring really well. Not as good as the VTAR system because we have more stuff going on the bottom, but they are extremely comparable. And what that means is even if you're out at distance shooting with long guns, you're going to hear your impacts and you're going to see some movement on the plate. And obviously the movement is going to depend on the caliber, the size of the projectile, the distance, and the velocity. So I like to think of training with the VTAR poppers in 3 different ways. I train with them with my pistols at close range, and then I'll train with long guns like a 10-3, 5.56, 16-inch 5.56, you know, AR-15s or fighting rifles at mid-range distances. And then I also like to think of this as a long-range bolt-action rifle, or more of a precision rifle target as well. And there's strengths and nuances to the system for each of those roles. Now, when we're training with pistols up close, this target plate's not going to move all that much. You're gonna get a little bit of movement, but notice that we are shooting smaller calibers, smaller projectiles, lower velocities. And that's why we have it set up with 2 different holes for the limiter pin, because we know that the energy from a pistol round is just not as much as a rifle. But we still want to see movement. We still want to hear that ring. We still want to reinforce the good habits. So you will get some movement when you're shooting with a pistol. You'll be able to see that, hear that, and if you're not getting the reaction you want, then you know that maybe you need to do some work, maybe you need to reinforce some of those fundamentals, maybe you're missing altogether, or you're hitting low and you're not getting the reaction. You would have to re-engage that target system as well. So when I'm looking at my pistols at close distances, I like to work transition drills into the shooting. I like to have multiple poppers on the range. And as I stated a couple minutes ago, sometimes they'll have the spring kit, sometimes nothing. I'll just knock them over and go down range and reset. If you're looking for efficiency with your pistol training, the spring kit does allow you to engage these just like our ADAP target system, where you don't even have to go down range and reset. So from an efficiency standpoint, these are amazing. And if you're an instructor training pistol classes at close distances, even though it is fairly quick to walk down range, this can save you some time on your range and avoid having to go down range at all to reset your targets. So when we're talking about mid-range with rifles, the VTAR systems are rated at 50 yards for most centerfire rifle calibers. So if you're using an AR-15, an AK, something like that, I like to train, especially with my LPVOs, my scopes, other things like that. I like to train at 50 yards, 100 yards, 200 yards and plus. And that's really where you start to see the audibility coming into play and the reactivity of the system. The fact that it is low to the ground is also awesome if you are shooting through cover or you have a woodland range. You can sort of embed these things into the tree line, and obviously you know where they're at because you placed them there, but you can really work your scanning, your analysis. You can experiment with shooting into different situations, different types of cover. You can really incorporate the VTAR poppers into a host of different training. And the benefit of this system, other than that audibility at distance, is the fact that, especially when you're hitting up toward the head, you're going to see movement with each impact. And that's especially true if we're doing controlled pairs with rifles at a distance. You can really see from the footage that when you impact this with 2 or 3 rounds in controlled sets, you're gonna get a ton of movement out of this plate, even with a caliber as light as a 5.56 NATO. And because of that, I think it has a valuable role to play in your training if you have a rifle, and you should have a rifle, because if you're watching this, you're probably an American and it's your God-given right to have one of those. The third scenario where I like to really think about the VTAR, I like to consider applying the VTAR into this type of training, is when we're running precision bolt guns. Now, precision bolt guns, when most people are shooting them, they are larger calibers. So we're able to increase the tension on the system. We're able to run the limiter pin in the second setting. And what that means is you're getting a substantial amount of movement out of this plate. If you impact this plate anywhere from center mass up, you're going to see a substantial amount of movement, especially with 308, 6.5 Creedmoor, 7mm mag, 300 Win Mag, things like that. You can get a ton of movement out of this plate. So what is that doing for us? Well, when we're out at distance shooting with our long guns with scoped rifles, it can assist you in calling your hits. So if you are shooting solo, you can call your hits very easily. They're reinforcing good fundamentals. This is especially true, like I said, at mid-range distances with controlled pairs. If we're trying to do the same sort of thing, have follow-up shots, follow-up engagements, you're able to call your hits immediately with the VTAR system. And because, again, we used the C-zone and reduced C-zone shape, you're able to also hear those impacts very clearly. And it's, again, going toward that efficiency. The efficiency of our shooting and our training, hearing those hits is reinforcing that we've done our part at the rifle and gotten the reaction or the result that we want downrange. And that's really where the VTAR popper shines. And the last role that I really didn't talk about much is with hunters. And hunters that are going out with precision rifles really need to know what their maximum point blank range is and how far they can actually aim directly on the animal that they're trying to take down. So incorporating the VTAR poppers into various scenarios that you would find yourself in the field is a solid idea. And that's partially why we have a gopher plate, because that's an extremely small target. And if you can engage a target that small at those long distances, when you go out deer hunting or coyote hunting or any other game that you're looking at taking, you can enter the field with more confidence, knowing that you could ethically take that game because you have put the time in on your system in a realistic training scenario. So the VTAR popper is all about efficiency. It's all about being able to adapt to the type of training that you find yourself in. And because of that, the VTAR system is one of the most versatile platforms that we have in our lineup. VTAR target system always filled sort of a specific role to me as a shooter, and I used it often in my training anytime I wanted a lower target system or something with some reactivity, but still maintained the same sizes and shapes of the other target systems that we manufacture and train with. And that's one thing that you're gonna notice right off the bat when we're talking about this second generation system, and even our first gen, to be honest. We wanted to run with more standardized shapes and sizes of target plates rather than just running with typical competition size and shape targets. Now, for a period of time, we did do the USPSA full size and reduced, and we did the USPSA Classic full size and reduced. But there's something that I noticed as we released the VTAR system, and it was that they're not applicable to as many people. And there's also a side benefit of running a C-zone and a reduced C-zone plate, and that is the audibility, the reactivity, the sound that you get out of these plates. So what users can expect from this second generation system is audible feedback that is nearly on par with our ADAP target systems. And if you're not familiar with the ADAP target systems, they have our base, usually a 2x4 post or an armored post, and then oftentimes a reduced C-zone target plate or a C-zone target plate. And we have a couple different variations with reactive paddles as well. Those systems became extremely popular and applicable for training because of the reactivity and the audible feedback that you get. And when we released the first generation of our poppers, they just didn't ring that well. And every time I trained with them, I just wanted more. I wanted something that sounded good when you impact it, because that's one of those benefits of steel targets, is that audible feedback that you get when you're doing your part and you're engaging the target properly. So as far as how these plates will function, they have 4 carriage bolts on the front that are grade 8. You can see they're kind of a golden zinc color. There's a washer behind the angles on the back, and then 4 lock nuts that are holding the angles. These angles are laser cut, CNC formed, and they serve a couple different functions and purposes. The angle itself has all of the holes for the pin that the target system rotates on. So when we see that thing rotating, that is a 1/2 inch pin that's going through the angles, through this base, allowing the target to rock backwards. There is another hole on the angles as well, but that's for stowage. So when you flip this target down, you're actually able to stow it in a fixed position with the second pin. And the second pin is also important. We're going to talk about that in a second. But when we look at the second generation VTAR system, when we look at it from a bird's eye view and we understand why we did the plates the way we did, how they're bolted together, how they are attached to the base, what you're noticing is this is an extremely portable target system. It's one of the most portable target systems that you're gonna find on the market, and it's designed like that specifically to add more value to you guys. It doesn't have a post, it's not high off the ground, so even if you have small berms or lower berms on your property, maybe they're not 8, 10 feet tall, maybe they're only 4 or 5 feet, you could run a system like this that's low to the ground. And that's just another benefit of the VTAR target system. So when we're talking about the base here, this base is multiple components. And you could probably see that from the design. The legs are bolted to what we call the base center. This is kind of like the spine of the system. And it looks like a razorback or something where it's got all of these different adjustments. And those are 4 different settings of the spring. Now, before I dive into what each setting would be and how you can use the pins in the front to adjust your system, I do want to let you guys know that you can run this system without the spring as well. You can just simply remove the spring. If you want the typical shoot and fall down reactivity of a popper target, perfectly fine. These are able to do that. They are included with that spring because it does add another layer of training value to you, like we discussed on the range, where you can, instead of having to walk down range and reset, you get the auto reset capability. So you're further programming your brain to engage a target, see a reaction, and then follow up based on that input. But these different adjustments are able to be achieved with this stainless steel machined pin. This is a custom pin that we manufacture out of stainless steel. It's got what are called E-clips on, and they're pretty tight. They will ship installed on your pin. They are sort of clicked in there. You can remove them with a screwdriver. Just be careful because they can go flying. But there's a center groove that's machined out of this, and that is to capture the spring. The same thing is done on the pin that's on the bottom of the angles on each target plate. It just captures the spring in the center. In years past, the Gen 1 system had a lot of bushings and washers, and it was just a lot of pieces to lose, and we wanted to simplify the Gen 2 and make it stronger, more consistent, more elegant. So we got rid of all the bushings, all the washers, all of that junk, and And we are now running with these custom machined stainless steel pins with E-clips. And it just makes everything that much simpler. But as I stated, if you don't want to use the spring setup, you can pull this pin. You can either leave the spring in the center spine and it's just gonna kind of flop back and forth as you shoot the target, or you can remove it. You can remove the pin on the bottom of the target plate, and that's gonna afford you the ability to have a knockdown target. So this pin is going to fit in the back spine of this base, and based upon how far you pull the spring, you're gonna add or reduce tension to your system. So why would that be important? Well, we know that if you're shooting with a 223 or a 9mm, it's vastly different than shooting with a 308 or a 6.5 Creedmoor or something larger like a 300 Win Mag. The foot-pounds of energy being exerted on the plate is vastly different among the different calibers that you're probably training with. We didn't want to create a system that worked well with 9mm, but when you hit it with a 308, it's just absolutely violent. Because what you're gonna do is weaken the system or create an unsafe system. We don't want any of that to happen. So the solution that we came up with was the adjustability of the spring, but also what I call the limiter pin. Now the limiter pin is here on the base, and there are 2 holes for this pin. The front pin is the pivot pin for the base. This front pin is where the target plate fastens to the base, but the back 2 holes here are what's called the limiter pin. So when I'm shooting 9mm, 223, say a 5.45 by 39, I put the limiter pin in the frontmost hole, and I keep the tension on the target system at the minimum based upon the movement I want to get. So it does require me, especially if you're shooting this for the first time, it'll require you to kind of put some test rounds on the target so you understand the ammo that you're using and the reactivity that you want. Put a couple test rounds in the system, check for the reactivity that I want. If it is simply kind of falling over and staying in a locked down position, add a little bit more tension by pulling that spring back to the next slot. If you find that it's violent and it's just slamming it with the caliber that you are using, you add a little bit more tension, and then you're going to reduce the wear and tear on the system because you're going to be absorbing that energy in a much better way. So when I'm shooting those bolt action rifles or larger calibers, it's helpful to have more movement in the system so that I can tell when I'm making those hits at longer distances. So that's why I will put this pin in the second hole and allow me to run more tension, or even maybe a little bit less tension, but have more movement on the system. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if you notice that you shoot the system and the plate kind of just falls backwards and gets locked into place, one of 2 things is happening. Either you don't have enough energy in that round to really slam that thing back to bring it forward, or you just have your springs adjusted wrong. You need to add a little bit of tension. That can all be done. It's no issue whatsoever. The only thing you want to be careful about is if your target is locked, leaning back, don't continue to send rounds on it because you could have skipping rounds going over your berm depending on the current layout of your range. The base itself is made out of 3/16 thick steel. Legs are the same. As you can see, it's elevated up off of the ground. That adds a little bit more height to the system. It's a little bit more elegant. It looks better, it functions better, and it's just all around a better design versus the older welded design. The older base was sort of like an H base. It was all welded together. There's no way to do maintenance in the event that you damaged it. The tab on the front here is bent up. It's tapped for a 3/8 inch bolt. And that bolt's important because if you want to run this without the springs and you want it to fall over even with lighter calibers, you're gonna wanna adjust that screw to adjust the amount of lean of the plate. So for example, if you're using a lighter caliber and you want it to still knock over the plate, you're gonna want to adjust that screw so that target plate is just balanced. It's just kind of hanging here, not falling over, but it's just balanced just right. And if you do that, you can even use a 22 and knock over these popper target systems. That's an awesome function. And the legs are bolted on. As you can see, the carriage bolts come from the top, the nuts are on the bottom, and what that does is keeps the bolts from interfering with the springs. But everything's replaceable, and that's a trend you see with all of our target systems. We want everything to be serviceable as much as possible so that if there's a mistake that's made, one of your buddies damages your legs or the base somehow fails because of misuse, you're able to purchase replacement parts without having to worry about an entire system being thrown in the garbage. One of the last details that I'm really proud of is over the last 1.5 years, we've switched from just painting our systems to getting these things powder coated. And that powder coat just adds another layer of protection to the system. A lot of people question if we're insane for doing that because it's a steel target and everybody's like, hey, you're gonna shoot the paint off. Yes, on the surface of the system, on the front of the strike plate, you will shoot the powder coat off, but the rest of the system remains protected. We don't want rusty looking junk on our ranges, especially if you're a professional range or you're running a competition. You want to have systems that reflect your level of professionalism, and having them powder coated resists rusting on the rest of the system. It's just a nice finishing touch that makes it nicer to have these systems. It's just that added value that we can do on our end to make a more complete system. So that powder coat is just another nice feature that we add to the systems, and it completes the package of all of our target systems. The last thing I wanted to mention about the target plates themselves, they are 3/8 inch AR 550 steel, same grade of steel that we use in all of our different steel target strike faces. They are covered by the 1-year warranty, like all of our 3/8 inch AR 550 strike plates. They're bolted on, so they are replaceable. You are able to adjust them so they have more of a forward lean, and the fact that they're moving when struck is going to act much like our ADAP system and reduce the wear and tear on the system. This is an extremely high grade of steel. It's honestly the best that we've ever found in the world, and we searched everywhere for this particular makeup of steel. It is more expensive. This is an expensive system. It's an investment in you and your range, just like every one of our other systems, but you've got a choice to make. You can buy a cheap system that doesn't serve you well, or you can support a US business that's making robust systems that are designed to last you for a lifetime of training. And ultimately, we know these systems aren't going to be for everybody, and I know that the VTAR, even with its revisions, is not going to be perfect for every single shooter. But if you are interested in it, if it does check off the boxes for you, we have them on our site. You can purchase them, we'll ship them right to your door. We will put the link down in the description. And keep in mind, some of the details, some of the functions of the system will change over time. So if you want the most up-to-date information, the website is the place to check that out. It's gonna be the best resource for you. You will also see these systems integrated in all of our content. So you'll be able to see more tips and tricks, more reels on Instagram and things like that. And it'll also show up in other YouTube videos. But if you still have questions, even after watching this video, just send us an email. We would be happy to answer any of your questions. We'll put all of that information in the description below. Guys, we appreciate you for tuning into this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Hopefully this system checks off some boxes for you. And if it does, get on our site, grab one, get it on your range. Most important thing, guys, get trained, stay focused, become a better defender of your loved ones.